Hey, nice tidy, like 17 minutes, maybe a little bit less. The road to Double or Nothing, I thought it was very efficient. Overall, high marks. As AEW tends to do very well, they put out all their stories in an effective manner. They use video incredibly well. And then their promos, because they feel unscripted, they can really punctuate moments very nicely in a way that a lot of WWE promos tend not to. I'm just going to break down the segments really fast and then get this thing up. So it opened with a Brody Lee interview with Shivani. I thought this was the weakest segment by far. I see what they were going for, but there was a little back and forth about, Tony Schiavone's like, what do I call you? And he says they decide on Mr. Brody. I get that what they're trying to get across is Brody Lee is unlikable, right? And the persona gets that across. It does not feel main event yet. And then Shivani asks him the question. He's like, let's just get this out of the way. I mean, it's not a cult, right? And then I like this part the best, I guess, in the segment because Mr. Brody then goes off and cusses and gets out of the chair, and you're not supposed to ask me about that and that kind of thing. So it was short and sweet and got to the point. It didn't do a whole lot to advance his match. Except for him sort of extolling his successes that he's had so far. Really, I think what the Dark Order suffers from, besides the obvious, is it doesn't feel like a world beater gimmick. And that's not just a matter of you got to book them there. It's also a matter of it just doesn't come across very well. The whole visual is not very striking. And if they want this dog to hunt. I find myself as a wrestling fan going, God, I hope he doesn't win the title. God, I hope they don't put the title on him just to try to get this thing over because it's terrible. And that shouldn't be the feeling that you get, but it's the feeling that I most definitely have. Moving on to the next segment, the QT Marshall, he's walking up to DDP's yoga studio, I assume, and he's on the phone with DDP, and then they're talking to each other through glass. Whoever's idea this was, it's brilliant, and it really works. And it covers up QT's weakness, which is he's not a very compelling figure. And they're analyzing his match, and DDP is taking on this mentor role. AEW does this very well. With Jake Roberts and Lance Archer, with Arn Anderson and Cody Rhodes, this idea of these wrestlers who shouldn't be wrestling anymore, but they have something to offer, and what they have to offer is insight. So I thought it elevated QT quite a bit by having Diamond Dallas Page break down his match. And QT tries to do what typical wrestling students do, which I thought was QT must have had a lot of fun playing the role of a wrestling student since he's a teacher. The hilarity of like making excuses and getting cut off, which he's probably had to do to numerous students and that kind of thing. I thought it worked very effectively, that kind of teacher-student role. And then DDP, the ultimate point of the promo was, you got to get yourself a finish. Why are you going to the top rope? We got guys in AEW that do the top rope like you wouldn't believe. You're a ground warrior. So, you got to come up with a finish because a great finish will change your life. And of course, this is DDP talking, who would know more about that than anybody. Again, a very effective segment. And I thought a great way to sort of give QT something back and something for us to pay attention to QT about, independent of being part of, a thing with Dustin Rhodes and whatnot. I thought it was a great little segment, great use of DDP, and QT, I think, came across really well as he's now been stripped down to bare wood, but we're curious to see if he can rise back up, and we're doubly curious on what this new finish will be. Great segment. One of my favorite of the thing, actually. TH2 had a ton of problems with this promo. The alliteration thing is cute and all, but there's nothing about them that came across as engaging. It came across really Bush League and indie. For God's sakes, can they... and I said this I wrote this note down for almost all the segments. Can they please put graphics up about who what these people's names are, so we can attach to it? Even the really attractive woman who kind of went over what's going to happen at Dynamite and stuff in the next segment, like she said her name at the top, but why not just have the name there? Why not have the names of these guys there? That's the only thing I could take away from this promo, because otherwise they lost me. I wasn't into it. The story that they were telling about, we didn't really lose to Party, blah blah blah. I could care less. They completely lost me. If the point of a promo is promotion, I would call this a colossal failure. This, along with the Brody Lee interview that was not to be in the beginning, were my least favorite parts of this thing. Again, names and graphics for this lady going over all of the other stuff. A great job recapping the attack from Phoenix on Orange Cassidy. Something that AEW does really well is when a moment happens, like Phoenix kicking Orange Cassidy is one of those things that got a lot of attention because it looked great and it was just perfectly done and it looked brutal. So they kept showing it. And then again, that's what you do. Right? So I thought that was really effective. And they set up all these different matches, who MJF is going to work with. I love that they brought up matchups that happened between competitors on the indies and talked about those indies. It really makes AEW feel bigger in scope, that they're a big part of the wrestling world and that they don't pretend that they don't exist. I think it's another way of taking advantage of the WWE, who used to pretend that nobody else existed, that they were the only thing in pro wrestling, and now they've acknowledged enough outside things, so now it just makes it seem like they're assholes for not talking about it. But AEW is more than willing to do it, just with the understanding that AEW is bigger than all of those indies that they're talking about, but they still acknowledge them, which I think is appreciated by everybody. MJF promo, of course, it's fucking great, and him talking about Jungle Boy and using Jungle Boy's name, very effective. He gets his catchphrase in there at the end, I'm better than you, kiss his ring, and you know it. Really great. He's setting up this story of like, oh, he's an underdog, which is great because he's acknowledging the elephant in the room, which is they're not going to have MJF lose. So instead he changes the narrative from, whoa, he's the underdog. Okay, yeah, he's the underdog, but is he really? He's a rich guy and blah, 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 blah. So he's doing what heels do, and it's just effective, and it's really great. And then finally, we close with Jon Moxley, who did a lot of the work that Brody Lee really should have done, which is put over this match, but he didn't do it. And Jon Moxley, he did more to try to put them over, though he couldn't resist taking little shots at the Dark Order, which again, I don't really blame Moxley for. It's too easy to make fun of the Dark Order. So our hope is that during this, can they pull this off? Can they not have Brody Lee win the title? Please God, no. But can they still make the Dark Order a huge viable threat on a different level than they currently are at, while continuing to let Moxley hold this title? I think he's a good champion. I think he's doing a good job with things. I think he's the right guy to have the champion at this point. And I like his explanation of how he's managed to achieve success and drawing parallels for the Inner Circle, how they always attacked him en masse. And so how he's used to being attacked by more than one person. I think it came across as really tough. I think it came across as really good and really a good babyface promo at a time where guys seem very reluctant to be babyfaces unless they're cornball about it. But Moxley, I think, is doing a really good job walking that line, and I really appreciated it. And overall, I would say this road to Double or Nothing was a success overall. I would just, again, hope that even with Moxley, why not just have his name and that he's the champion? Never assume, and I always caution this about AEW, never assume that the people watching this are diehards. Always assume that everything is an opportunity to make fans and get first-timers to continue to enjoy and sample your product and buy a pay-per-view. Anyway, that's what I got to say. I'm going to get ready to watch Raw. Thanks for tuning in to this look at the road to Double or Nothing. Peace.